Hi, English 1301 students, it's Dr. Murray. I'm making you a video about essay number 3. I have a lot to say, so I'm going to get moving on it. But the first thing I'm going to say is I passed out the assignment sheet for this essay in class, but you can also find it in Canvas on our homepage in the section called Essay Assignment Sheets, etc. It's the assignment for essay number 3. So the first thing I want to point out is that this essay is a rhetorical analysis of the rhetoric of Ariel Levy, the author of Trial by Twitter. So unlike essay 2, which sort of analyzed the rhetoric of the subject of the piece we were looking at, in that case, the documentary The Inventor, Out for Blood in Silicon Valley, we did a rhetorical analysis of Elizabeth Holmes and Theranos, the subject of the piece. In this case, we're not doing an analysis of the subject of the piece, which would be Alexandria Goddard, etc., like anonymous as well. We are doing a rhetorical analysis of the author of the piece. So that's Ariel Levy. So it's her rhetoric that you're analyzing. So to frame it that way, it presupposes that her article is ultimately an argument, which it might not seem like one at first, because it might seem like, oh, she's just conveying information. But in class, we looked at the fact that she does have an opinion about things. And that's appropriate for this genre, for her to have an opinion. She's not prejudging the situation. She states her opinion after she's done in-depth research and figured some things out about the situation. So we know at the bottom of page 20, top of page 21, that's where she gives an overview of what she felt like the narrative was online about what had happened, the night of the assault against the girl from West Virginia. So Ariel Levy says, in versions of the story online, and she tells this narrative of what was circulating online. And then at the end of all that, she says, none of that was true. And so that is Ariel Levy cutting through, frankly, the BS to say, I'm here to tell you what really happened and what didn't happen to the best of my ability based on the research that I've done. And, we know that Ariel Levy went and met most of the important people involved in person. She took multiple trips to Steubenville, at the end of the article, to the new location where Alexandria Goddard is living. She's spoken to Jane Hanlon. She's, looked through different evidence. So she's gone to great lengths to figure out what happened. She has an opinion, and she's going to tell us. So her article is an argument. And in a way, the title Trial by Twitter shows that she doesn't just go, what happened in Steubenville? That's not her title. She says Trial by Twitter. And I think that's a way of saying it's as if the potential people who might be considered guilty were being tried online. And I don't think that Ariel Levy thinks, and I hope that you don't think that would be appropriate to try people online, because the people online are not the experts, they're not the authorities, they're not the people that are supposed to have the power to decide who's guilty and who's not. We have a justice system for a reason, imperfect as it may be. One thing the article tells us is when Steubenville in the past had problems with corruption, they were addressed, that the United States federal, Department of Justice stepped in to oversee and to try to, get them back on track with getting rid of corruption and so on and so forth. And I'm not saying therefore thereafter it was perfect, but there are no controls on the general public and what they post online. So it can't be that would be the appropriate way to determine what happened that night. Okay, so you're going to analyze Ariel Levy's rhetoric in your essay. One thing to keep in mind is the genre, which is investigative journalism. I posted 2 definitions of investigative journalism in Canvas. One is from the Nashville Film Institute. Another is from an organization called UNESCO. The definition of investigative journal, and you should read both. The definition of investigative journalism from the Nashville Film Institute is longer, and so it's a richer sort of overall sense of what investigative journalism is. It's not very long, but it's longer than the other one. But if you read that one without reading the other definition, you might go, oh, okay, so it's this genre in which a journalist dives into a situation where there is either corporate or political corruption of one kind or another that needs to be investigated and reported on so the public can know what's going on. Well, that is often what investigative journalism is, and as we saw in the case of the film The Inventor, that was a case of corporate corruption. If you look at the UNESCO definition, and UNESCO, the UN at the beginning of it is related to the UN and United Nations. This is an organization associated with the United Nations. Their definition, which is shorter, I included because it has a phrase in there that comes very close to describing the situation you're dealing with in the article Trial by Twitter, which is a situation, I'm paraphrasing here, but a situation where circumstances have caused there to be a great deal of confusion about what the truth is in a situation because of the dissemination of misinformation or a clouding of perception based on stories people have put out there that are false and things like that. And so the investigative journalist's job in that case is to step in and clarify what the truth is, which is essentially what happens in this article. So those definitions are important. I'm not saying you need to memorize them, but you're going to have to say something about it in the introduction of your essay. So let me get right to that, the introduction of this essay. You're going to have to name some important information in your introduction, namely author of the article, Ariel Levy, publication, The New Yorker magazine, genre, investigative journalism or an investigative journalistic magazine article, and the date it was released, the article date it was published, August 5th, 2013. So that's something you need to do, is give us that information. Another thing you need to do is give us a bit of a summary. You've got to keep in mind that your reader isn't going to be familiar with, the subject matter of Ariel Levy's article. So, wow, you don't have many sentences to give an overview of this 30-page article. So you really got to put some thought into what it's about. I think one hint is the title, Trial by Twitter, which gets right to the point of basically saying, Goddard, Anonymous, and others were essentially trying to convict certain individuals on Twitter or on social media or online somewhere, rather than allowing the authorities to do their job. And in fact, Goddard and Anonymous and others actually got in the way of the authorities being able to do their jobs by creating rumors that there was corruption, creating a large degree of public sentiment, believing there was a cover-up and all this, when there's no evidence whatsoever that the authorities, the police or prosecutor Jane Hanlon or anyone else, acted inappropriately or unethically. So that's essentially what this article is about. It's not so much about the crime that took place, which must be mentioned, but the focus of it is really on the fact that Goddard and Anonymous and others online created a great deal of confusion when the authorities were already trying to get to the bottom of what happened. Okay, besides that information and the overview of what happened, it's important also to clarify the purpose, or to give an explanation to some degree of investigative journalism. It needs to be succinct, but it connects back to what I was saying about the part from the UNESCO definition, which is basically a journalist's need, or a journalist, investigative journalism in this case has to do with a journalist going in and doing an in-depth investigation to get to the bottom of a situation that's become very confusing. But read the UNESCO definition because it says it in a little better than I just said it. Your thesis, which will come at the end of that paragraph, is going to be about Ariel Levy's rhetoric, and so it's going to deal with ethos, pathos, and logos. But I also think that you should, before you end your thesis, it should connect to the idea of her purpose, which is to get to the truth about what happened that night in Steubenville, basically, to get to the bottom of what happened that night in Steubenville, despite, the misinformation spread online. That's what you're going for in your introduction. So there's a lot to accomplish, and, it's going to take some trial and error. Now, as far as what you're doing in your body paragraphs, you want to go through the article and figure out what are the best examples of how Levy establishes her credibility, in other words, ethos, how she makes emotional appeals to the reader, that is pathos, and, and obviously, finally, her logos, which is, remember that logos isn't just logic and reasoning, but it's truth. It's getting to the facts about something. And so on the assignment sheet, at the bottom of the first page, and then, almost halfway down the second page of the assignment sheet, I have all of these questions to point you to different aspects of the article. How does it begin? How does it end? How does she use quotes? What does the title tell us? Where does she, does she include her opinion and why? Just all these different sort of specific aspects of rhetorical choices she makes in the article. I didn't give you that long list so you could just go down the list and talk about stuff in that order in the paper. Those are questions to try to point you to going, these are lots of different specific choices she made. The point is not to try to talk about all of them. The point is going, do these make you think of particular instances in the article where, where Levy does something that particularly is a good example of how she establishes her ethos, or where she makes a pathos appeal, or where it becomes clear that what she's doing is an example of her logos. And so while you've got that long list of things, every one of those things potentially fits into the category of either ethos, pathos, or logos. And so you can't cover everything. There's so much in the article, but just try to figure out what the best examples are of how she makes choices under each of these categories, ethos, pathos, and logos, to achieve her end or her purpose, which is to get to the bottom of what happened, to create clarity where there was previously confusion. Okay. And of course, the conclusion of your essay, you'll reflect on what the significance of all this is. We can talk about it more in class. But that's my spiel about how to approach this essay. I hope that helps, and I will see you in class.